The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everybody, my name is Matthew and I'm going to be presenting today's Agile information webinar. What is Agile? This webinar should take around 45 minutes. You will be on mute during this time, so if you have any questions you can actually use the question feature in the webinar tool. During the presentation I'll actually be asking you some questions in the form of a survey as well. If you do have any technical issues, for example with voice over IP, try dialing in on your phone, that will also work. And then failing all else, the best thing to do actually is just to log off and log back in again and join us. But the very worst thing that can actually happen today is actually I lose my connection. So we have a backup. If that happens, I'll be back with you in a few minutes. We'll also be making a recording of the entire session and we will make that available to you later after the event. So without further delay, and let's have a sweeping statement about Agile. So Agile, well, basically it's an approach to working. Some people call it a concept or a method, but above all, actually, it's about people and results. And this is something that we're going to see during the next 45 minutes or so. But I'm going to make some assumptions first. You're new to Agile. You've heard something about this Agile. What could it be? In fact, you're just curious. So let's run a little survey before we get into the beef of this webinar, this presentation. So let's have a look at, find out what your level of Agile experience is. So launching a poll here. What's your level of experience? What do you know today? Select one of the following. You've heard of Agile, but you're not sure what it is. You've observed Agile teams in action. You've worked in an Agile way before, e.g. Scrum. You're fully certified, but still have lots to learn, or you're a full pro. So I'll give you a few moments to respond to that question. So some answers are coming through. Okay, let's see. I think that most people have voted. Let's close the poll. Let's have a look at the results. Let's see what we have. Most of you have actually heard of Agile, but not really sure what it is. That's great. Some of you have worked also in an Agile way. That's also pretty cool. So we're going to be really focusing on today's session on those that first 80% of people. You've heard of Agile, not sure what it is. This is perfect for you, but it's also a good reminder for those of you that have actually worked in an Agile way as well. So, hiding those results, let's continue with the presentation. So, first of all, some words about me. Yeah, this is me. That I do look like this. I am English. I've been living in Switzerland since 1994. I come from near Liverpool, Manchester, which basically explains this strange accent. I do have an IT background, but I discovered the advantages of being agile in 2009. And and why do I do what I do? Well, actually, this is quite a fundamental belief that I have. I believe after all these years that everybody should be given the opportunity to actually do their utmost potential in their working lives so that they can go home to their families fulfilled, their children, their wives, their husbands. This is what drives me. This is the passion that I have. And actually, I've seen that agile practices contribute significantly to this. And we're going to see an example of that in a few moments. So enough about me. What are you going to actually benefit from today? What are you going to learn? Or regardless of the type of organization or the work that's being done, whether that is project or daily operations, you're going to see why and how Agile actually helps by motivating people. They're going to understand, or you're going to understand, why purpose is important, why the sense of mastery, people getting better, and also that Agile helps in creating a sense of autonomy, allowing teams to work with autonomy. You'll also see that management actually need to be able to support this being agile. It's not something that individuals can just do. Management need to support it as well. Management need to serve the team. And all of these things you're going to see and learn today. So let's have a look at a quick overview of today's session. What is the problem? Why consider being agile? And where can it be applied? Those are the three fundamental questions we're going to answer. So the problem, why consider being agile? When we think about it, organizations are in a bit of a mess today. We've been in recession, we're now in double recession, we're in the 21st century, we should know better. We don't. Okay? So let's run another survey. The question I'm going to ask you now is, how many people are truly engaged at work today? How many do you think that is? So here's your second survey question. On average, how many people are truly engaged at work? Is it everybody? Is it 4 in 5? Is it 3 in 5? Or is it just 1 in 5? What do you think? Truly engaged today. So the poll was quite quick that time. So let's have a look. Let's close the poll. Let's have a look at the results. Look at that. You believe, more of you believe that it's 2 in 5, 1 in 5. Now that's however we look at that, that's a pretty disastrous environment to be working in. It means that 3 people in 5, according to you guys, 3 in 5 people are not engaged in their work. No wonder we're in a bit of a mess. So according to this guy, Stephen Denning, who wrote this book in 2011 called Radical Management, when he was doing his research, he discovered that only 1 in 5 employees, 1 in 5, were actually truly engaged at their work. Now, if we think about that a little bit more, well, first of all, that's disastrous sort of statistics. But in some areas, it must be worse. This, if you don't know it, is the City of London, the financial capital of the world. And they've been under a lot of pressure for 4 years. What must it be for them? How engaged are they? 1 in 20, perhaps? So when we think about that, there must be a lot of fear in the workplace, a lot of fear. People are scared. They daren't put their head out. They don't want to lose their jobs. There is a lot of fear. And when we think about it, management is still using 20th century techniques. And here is a classic example. Now, I have been this guy, and I have been this guy in my career. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to tell you a story about a guy called M that I used to work with. I'm going to just refer to him as M. He was a very, very difficult character. Before we went agile, he was really, really a prickly chap. He was always under pressure. And one day we were running a project. We asked him how long it would take, and he said 20 days. After 10 days, me being the project manager, responsible to the owner of the company, I asked him how long he had left, and he said, "I will have it done in 20 days." And 10 days had already passed, and all I wanted to know was he 25% complete or 75% complete? He wouldn't tell me. He just said, "I will be done after 20 days." This was and I couldn't accept this because this was a risk to the project. He was on the critical path. And we ended up having quite an argument. I was 38 at the time, and he was 42, and we were really having a go at each other. And in the end, one of the very respected managers of the organization had to take us into a room and sort us out. And that was the situation before we went agile. 6 months later, the very same guy, M, came to me and said, I am done. My team is on track. Who else can I help? Exactly the same guy. It's a completely different attitude. And this is an example of what agile or agile approaches can do. And we'll see why that happens. So Denning also discovered something slightly odd. He discovered that a particular group of employees were far more engaged than normal. IT geeks. Yeah. Now these are the guys that live in the cellar. These they don't actually like to talk to each other. All they do is talk to computers. But they were highly engaged. They worked all day, then they went home, wrote software for free, and sold it for free in the form of shareware, open source. They were highly motivated. So what was it? He discovered that they were following so-called agile techniques. So where does this agile thing come from? Well, if we go back to the 60s, we know that in Japan, they were pretty good at producing cars and manufacturing physical things. Now, I'm going to put an emphasis on the physical for later. But we also had during this time, and right through to the 80s, 90s, and even today, lots of frustrated IT guys because they were delivering late, poor quality, not what was wanted, and always over budget. We've seen the disaster stories. Millions and billions of dollars have been wasted. But in 2001, a group of these frustrated guys from around the world, in individual islands around the world, had discovered that they were actually doing something very similar, but there was no common name for it. So they all met in Utah, not far actually, or maybe in the near to this place here. They came up and crowned the term Agile. We're going to find out what that really means shortly. But let's go back to motivation again. Daniel Pink's book, Drive, said that the 21st century knowledge worker needs more for motivation. He needs more. You've got the question of money. You pay people enough money to take the problem or the question of money off the table. But they still need more. He discovered they needed to have three things. The first was a sense of purpose. The second was a mastery. And the third was autonomy. Now let's have a quick look at those. Purpose. Why am I doing this? That is the sense of purpose. The best examples are always helping others. For example, to make toys that bring a smile to a child's face. There's no better feeling actually than wanting to go to work. Mastery. How good is my work? But not only how good is it, people actually want to get better at doing it too. So we all know this guy, Usain Bolt. He's highly motivated to constantly beat his world record. And autonomy. This is where the team decide how they do the work. Now this is stopping command and control of management. It's the team essentially that puts the ball in the back of the net. It's not the manager. So we can conclude therefore that agile approaches directly influence motivation. All these IT guys were all highly motivated. Therefore they must have had a sense of purpose. They must have been good and got better at what they were doing, and they were actually allowed to do things how they wanted to do them. But the big questions are, what are the common denominators of agile approaches, and where can we actually apply those techniques within an organization? These are the things that people ask me. So the common denominators, or that's what we're going to look at first, the common denominators. Then we're going to looking at change projects, running agile projects. Then we're going to look at daily operations, running daily operations. And then we're going to see how management have to support these two. And this is the body of today's session. So the common denominators, what are they? Delivery of value. With a traditional project, for example, you only deliver your value at the end of the project. With agile approaches, you deliver the most valuable things first and frequently. Next is your client engagement, delighting your client, making them satisfied. Traditional projects, you have lots of contact at the beginning, nothing for a period of time, and then you deliver the project at the end. Agile approaches make sure that you have client engagement throughout the life of the project. How hard is it to change? Traditional projects, because we do all that upfront planning, which we'll see in a minute, all that detailed analysis upfront, is extremely difficult to change very, very quickly. In the agile world, it's easier. We'll see why. And then the risk to the success. Traditional projects, you've not delivered anything until the end. Therefore, your risk has to remain high for a long time. Whereas with agile, because you're delivering value early, which is what we saw up here, delivering value early, your risk to success reduces very quickly. And these are the 4 common factors, or the 4 common denominators of agile approaches. All make sense. So let's have a look at running projects, changing projects. We all know that the world is changing faster than ever. Organizations need to change as well. We all know that well-known Swiss insurance company that says, because change happens. It happens faster and faster and faster in today's world. Yet companies need to embrace this change, not resist it. And a lot of organizations resist change once the plan is in place, which is what we're seeing here. Most projects, most activities are planned at the start to the finest detail. But within weeks, days even, this will change. Now, this causes resistance, causes friction, causes a waste of time. So let's take a classic example, a good example that everybody will understand. Taking a road trip from LA to Grand Canyon. Now, I've done this trip on holiday, and I personally spent a lot of time planning the route, the road, the stopovers, where I was going to be. But as soon as we got on the road, a breakdown could have happened. We had road closures. There could be a traffic jam. And I was traveling with a companion, and she said to me, why don't we go over there and have a look at this? It was 100 miles away, 150 kilometers away. That completely trashed my plan. And if you're traveling with children, this can also happen. So all that detailed upfront planning was just wasted time and effort. All I needed to do, and all agile projects need to do, is plan at a high level, prioritize the big building blocks. This means, for me in my example, that I knew that I needed to travel from LA to the Grand Canyon South Rim in 4 days. And I overnighted at near to Barstow, Needles, or Flagstaff. I didn't need to plan the route nor where I was going to stay. Basically, we don't plan the details. And this is the challenge. Excuse me, just a glass of water there. We've got to accept that things change as the journey is made and that detail emerges. It makes common sense. But if the details are emerging, the scope, which means what is it we're doing, must also be variable. So in the traditional project world, we would like to traditionally fix the scope. We like to pretend that we're fixing the time, but we all know we're going to slip the time and therefore the cost. And quality, some things will work and some things will be, let's just say, questionable. And this is how most projects traditionally have run. Let's turn that on its head. And the agile approach is we're fixing the time and therefore the cost. Whatever we're building in that time works. The thing that's variable is the scope. What is it we're doing? So how do we structure this work? It's all done in short bursts called time boxes or sprints. And these are typically 2 to 4, sometimes 6 weeks. I've personally seen a team in the UK doing 2.5 week sprints. And I think it's slightly insane, but that's my own opinion. But it worked for them. That's how they wanted to organize themselves. And it worked. So let's take an example, a 3-week time box. It looks like this. First of all, we spend 2 or 3 days actually looking at what we're going to do when we plan it. We then do it, and then towards the end, we review what was done. And we close off any unfinished work. Now, what this will result in is things that have not been done will be considered for the next time box, together with any new ideas, things that are coming from the business, new threats that are coming, new opportunities, new threats that need to be dealt with. And this, delivering in short bursts, allows us to reevaluate frequently, making us agile. And this is what those guys had discovered in 2001. Around the world, from the US, from the UK, from Australia, from New Zealand, they realized that they were working in these short bursts. But they all called it differently, and that's why they came together, they met, found the common theme, and called it Agile. So the thing is, you just have to get started. We've said that we don't want to plan everything up front. We just need to get started. So we need to work on the most important thing first. Remember, we don't produce the details for everything. Because the longer we delay, the more likely change will occur, and we'll have to go and change those detailed plans. We haven't delivered anything yet. And in that time, if we're working on plans and detail, we haven't got any feedback yet from our client. And we'll see why that's important in a moment. But the more likely somebody else will also do the work, a competitor. So if you're spending lots of time up front planning, doing detailed analysis work, somebody else is going to get there before you. Example, that Finnish company Nokia. They were market leaders for many years, but now they're about to go bust. They were just too slow. So let's examine the detail when the time box starts. And this is where the team actually sits together and works out the detail. This is the Lego bricks. This is the smallest Lego bricks. They will actually figure out how to assemble them, and they will commit to their plan. It's an important word, committing to their plan. And then every day they will actually discuss progress, and this is called the daily stand-up. This is where peer pressure takes effect. This is much better than a manager controlling. So before with Masood, for example, so I've just given his name away there, that's great. the point with M was that I was going in and asking him what the status was. Well, actually what you want is his peers to be putting pressure on. And during the stand-up, people will be saying, I've done this, I'm working on this, and I'm having a problem here. But if they'd put an estimate for 3 days on something, and after 5 days they're still saying, I'm working on this, they're having to tell all their team that they are threatening the success of that time box or sprint. And that's where peer pressure takes in. They don't want to lose face. And it's very, very, very powerful. Every day they stand up and they talk about what they've done, what they're going to do, and the problems they're having. It's all very transparent. And this is autonomy. Giving the guys the problem, letting them sort out what they're going to do, how they're going to solve it, and how they plan their work. Autonomy. It's one of the main motivation points. So let's review what was done at the end. That's what the guys have to do. We said we wanted to get early feedback, and the client will always tell you what he wants when he sees what you have done. He will always tell you that. The worst case scenario is after your 3 weeks, you've actually not done what the client wanted, yet you will have learnt plenty. But all you've lost is 3 weeks of effort or 2 weeks of effort, rather than work all that for that entire project period and find out at the end it's not what was wanted. It has to make sense to do it this way. And the reviews also help the team to understand why their work helps the client, the customer, or the stakeholder. And this is purpose. This is giving them a sense of purpose. Why am I doing this? They're getting direct exposure to the client, to the person that's going to use their work, giving them more motivation. And at the end of each time box, we also give the team a moment to reflect on how they worked. And this is called the retrospective. So what do they have to start, stop, or improve? And this results in actually delivery of higher quality work. And it's all about getting better, and which is the sense of mastery. People are getting better at their work. We're going to see a good example of this later with operations. So here is an example of a software product company in Zurich. Within 12 months of going agile, they had 40% better teamwork, 40% better quality. Their engagement was higher. They were innovating. And where did those figures come from, that 40, 40, 50? We asked our entire organization what they felt, and these were the results. But not only that, their key client had reported a 76% reduction in problems, in defects. And when we as a company were actually trying to win business with a major organization, that organization preferred 90% of their selection committee preferred us to the competition because of the way we worked, because of our high level of motivation, because we were proud of what we were doing. And ultimately, we had 100% client satisfaction. And how did we do that? First step is you have to convince your senior management. You have to train people. You have to come up with the initial list of what you need to do. You then set up the teams to deliver, the best teams to deliver that work. And then the teams estimate, plan, and start to do and deliver frequently. And you review your progress in terms of your agile skills frequently with a coach. So the result was basically, for this software company, they were delivering on time, slightly under budget, and the quality was better than ever. That's a fairly significant success story. So that's a summary of how Agile can be applied, Agile techniques are applied to working with Agile projects. So let's have a look at daily operations. Now these are typically process-driven. Processes are defined, people follow them. And with what we're trying to do here is, what is very tempting to do, is actually try to push as much work to these people as possible. You're pushing, you're filling that process. Keep everybody busy because that looks good. It justifies that headcount, if I may be a little bit cynical. But actually, this could be happening. Oh my dear, these are so busy times. I have so many things to do. I don't know what I should do first. Go for coffee. Maybe I should Twitter about this. So one problem with process is there's no challenge for people. This poor chap, he's obviously bored. He doesn't get an opportunity to improve. He becomes a robot. He degenerates over the long term and has no motivation. But that's the status quo. That's how things are in that environment. Or you're completely overloaded. Bottlenecks are not known. There's too much to do all of the time. You cannot focus, you get burnout, and quality drops. Those are the two scenarios. Either people are bored or there's just too much to do. What we need to do is actually balance that so we don't force feed the process. Work in progress does not get interrupted. That means we've got the classic situation where somebody's working on something, they get interrupted, they drop the first thing, they start on the second. A third comes in, they drop the second, start on the third. A fourth comes in, they're halfway through working the fourth. Time has progressed and nothing has been delivered. How frustrating is that? We all know it. We have to reduce that context switching. We have to allow people to focus. We have to get transparency on the bottlenecks of the process. And we also need to allow people the time to improve. That means that they improve themselves, they improve the processes. And we do this by introducing something called a concept of limiting the work in progress. And this is all around autonomy. So, and this is all based on lean manufacturing, Kanban. So if you remember, the Japanese word is Kanban. If you remember at the beginning, I showed a picture of the Japanese flag and the manufacturing of a car, automobile. In the knowledge management world, we're looking at PowerPoints, Word documents, PDF files, Excel, images. This is our inventory. This is what we're working on. So how do we do it? We also have to introduce queues for Slack, So how do you introduce a Slack or queues when I'm producing an Excel spreadsheet? It's a kind of alien concept. But the beauty of this approach is there is no processes change. The roles and responsibilities of individuals do not change. Yeah? And it allows people to proactively work on issues and get better, which is that sense of mastery. It also helps each other when bottlenecks occur. This is a sense of purpose. Why am I doing this work? Because the next person the in the process needs it. So here's an example of an investment bank in Zurich. Within 8 weeks, and I repeat, 8 weeks, the time to deliver had reduced from 60 days to 13. They'd identified 35 impediments or problems with their process that they were proactively working on getting rid of. They could see the bottlenecks move from one day to the next. The real process, we started off by modeling the process, but within a few days we recognized that we'd forgotten people who were also part of the whole process. We had full transparency on the status of what was going on, who was working on what. The tasks with problems became visible, and the team constantly improved. And within, immediately, we actually completely eliminated everything to do with planning, estimating, and scoping. So all those meetings were gone. We just saved all that time. And priorities could be changed at any time. And priorities were always transparent. And how did we do this? Well, again, you have to convince your senior management that this is an approach that could work for them. Training was necessary. Everybody had to understand how this worked. We had to model the process as it was. We didn't change anything. That was the process as it was. We identified those items, those Word documents, etc., that needed producing. We proactively addressed the problems when they arised, and we managed the work in process limits, and we were coaching periodically. So here is an example of one of these so-called Kanban boards. At this particular investment bank was a physical board in the middle of an open plan office. So everybody could walk by and see. But this example here, what we're seeing is the backlog column is everything that needs to be done. And there's one guy who's responsible for selecting a couple of them and putting them here. Whatever's in the selected column is the highest priority. But this limit at the top, this number 2, says he can only put 2 items in here. But he can change them whenever he gets a new thing or priorities change, he can swap them in and out. The people doing the work, you can see they will select the highest priority item from here, start working on it when they have capacity to do so, and you can see that these 3 people are working on that ticket. What that means is somebody walking by who's got a question about that ticket can say, I can see who's working on it. He doesn't need to ask anybody, he can see it. And this one guy's working on this ticket. When they're done, they'll put it into the done column. But in total, the maximum number of things that these people can be working on is 3. It means that they can focus. You reduce that context switching. And here we can see that 2 people are working on the one ticket for deploying, whatever that might be. But here that little red sign means that they have a problem. It means that they can't start because there's only one item here. They can't start on anything new, which means that eventually these will go into the done and we will see the bottleneck occurring, and that bottleneck is here. But once they're done, it will go live. It's a simple example. And that is daily operations. So when we look at management, what is the role of management in all of this? We talk about line managers here and being an agile line manager. So the first thing that they need to do is motivate the team. What works now may not work tomorrow when he looks at his team, how he's motivating them. They are all different people. So if he's motivating person X in a certain way today, that person circumstances may change and it needs to be changed. So it's constant work. People always change. Their priorities change in their private life. You can't just set them targets at the beginning of the year and expect them to be the same at the end of the year. and every single person is different. And one of the classic examples that I'm aware of in the Agile world was in 2010, a team had to reach a particular goal, and the management were thinking, how do we motivate them to do so? And we'll see what they did later, or how they approached it later. But essentially, they thought, well, let's give them a big financial bonus. But they actually asked the team what they wanted, and the team were all big fans of football. And they said, well, if we reach it, will you give us tickets or buy us tickets and flights to South Africa to watch the German football team? And that's what they did. It's motivating the team. So coaching the team. Yeah, this is about developing competencies and building on existing strengths. Now, I personally, when I started my career, I used to be evaluated every year across 7 dimensions. And some of those dimensions I was good at, and some of them I was poor at. And my manager at the time, not knowing anything better, was trying to build up my competencies in those weaker areas. That was actually the false, because I'm not that motivated in getting better in those areas. I'm motivated in getting better at the things that I do well. And this is all mastery. Build on current competencies, on existing strengths. That's coaching the team. And then improve everything. Now, this could be the environment. This could be the technical environment, getting better scripts in place, giving people, if you're in the IT world, giving them faster hard disks. If you're not in the IT world, the people you're talking about, knowledge workers, I'm sure they would like a faster machine. If they're complaining about how slow their machine is to produce documents on, they're going to be complaining about it, and that's energy lost. They could also be complaining that the coffee machine is next to the bathrooms, which is extremely unhygienic. Again, they're wasting time talking about it. Don't you want those people to be doing work instead of complaining about the coffee machine? But also be aware of the impact on things like HR, recruitment, reviews, bonus. I mentioned before about motivation, about this group that went down to Germany to watch the football. Traditionally, organizations will reward people for their individual contribution. And at the end of the year, they get evaluated on that individual contribution. In an agile world, you talk about a team, teamwork. And if they still have their individual bonuses and goals, if they still have that, come September, October, certainly November and December, all they're going to be thinking about is reaching their personal goals. And they're going to be aiming for those instead of the goals of the team. So you have to be aware of that sort of impact as well. And ultimately, you're clearing the way for the team. You're getting rid of all the things that are distracting them. Get them focused on their work. And don't solve the problems yourself. I was working with doing a workshop with the CEO, and we were talking about agile approaches, and they were a manufacturing company, and they were looking at doing this. So it's non-IT. They were a design organization. They designed things. They then built them, manufactured them, and then distributed them around the world, their products. And she said to me, and she was really, really hooked on this, and she couldn't come away from it. Her question was, do I stop people clocking in and clocking off at the beginning and the end of each day? And she spent half an hour thinking about it. Yes, she had a question she needed to answer, but she didn't need to answer that herself. And there's the example. Take the problem to the team. That could be a question. It could be, how do we motivate you, as we saw with the World Cup example. But you also need to trust the team to deliver for you. You build your team, and then you say, I need you to actually answer this problem, solve it for me. You give them the constraints in which to work. And don't forget that people are actually more motivated to resolve problems and not just carry out tasks. So a lot of managers, 20th century manager, will issue tasks. You need to do this. And when we go back to the case of M, we were said to M, this is the task we need you to carry out. And he said it would take 20 days. But we were giving him a task to do, not to resolve it. And we were not giving him a problem to resolve. Remember, people are motivated to resolve problems. And this is all about the sense of autonomy, giving them the sense of autonomy, giving them the question. The manager today, the challenge that they need to, the challenge for them is actually formulating the question they need answering. That is the challenge. Finding the people to resolve it is easy. So this all leads us to something called servant leadership. And this is where we help the team to resolve their issues that are outside of their responsibility. Now, why do we say that? The best people to solve a problem are those that are suffering from it themselves. So if you've got team members that have got problems, leave them to get on with it and solve it themselves. Don't take it from them. I've seen examples where I've been coaching people and they've identified these impediments and they've taken those problems away from the team member. All it means is that the team member doesn't feel responsible anymore, and the manager hasn't got the capacity anyway to resolve it, so it doesn't actually get fixed. So if the team members have problems, coach them through their own problem solving. Only take those problems that are outside of their responsibility, and that's what we're stating here. If it's something that's outside of their area of authority or their responsibility, take it from them. Help them to resolve it. And all of this requires a mindset change for the manager. It requires trust. You need to trust in your team. You can no longer command and control. This is extremely demotivating. You need to give your team autonomy. You need to give them a sense of purpose of why you're doing that work, and they need to get better at it. And that's the role, quickly, of management in an agile world. So we've looked at the common denominators. We've looked at how agile can influence projects in terms of short sprints, in terms of getting feedback early. Don't do upfront analysis and design, but once you start on the sprint, let the teams do the deep diving and find out all the details. Let them do the plan, let them commit. Daily operations, we've seen, we need to limit the work in progress, let people focus, let people deliver, identify bottlenecks, work on resolving those bottlenecks, get better at it. And we've seen an example of that. And then finally, management. It's all about servant leadership. Help your team, be there for your team, coach them, motivate them. So, last survey. If we look at this, those three aspects, which of those topics do you think your organization could benefit from the most? Agile in projects, improving daily operations, or improvement in agile line management? Give you a few moments to answer that question. Okay, let's see what we think. It's very interesting results, by the way. Closing the poll, share the results. And what we find is that most people think that line management could actually improve the most. That's pretty interesting, because ultimately it is the line management that are responsible for the delivery of this, of being agile. Very, very astute observation and feedback. Okay, let's hide those results. So now, basically summarizing everything, regardless of the organization and the type of work, project or daily operations, we can see that being agile raises motivation because they understand the purpose of their work. They gain a sense of mastery. They're getting better at what they do, and they can work with real autonomy. They decide how they work, and they commit to it, their own plans. Yet we also understand that management need to support being agile, and they need to support the team with this servant leadership. So think about your own circumstances for a moment. What would you do if your existing team had just 20% more motivation? Or if the quality was 20% better, what's it worth? Think about that financially. And are you really getting better at what you do? The sense of mastery. So what next? Well, as I mentioned at the beginning of this webinar, we're going to send you an email with this recording. And we ask you if you want to deepen your knowledge, treat yourself to a half-day seminar, or look at our specialist courses. To want to talk to us more about our experiences, by the way, all our clients will give reference calls. Just let us know. And finally, stay in touch. So with that, are there any questions? I'm just waiting to see if anybody's got any questions. Here we've got a question. Okay, we've got one comment saying, thanks a lot, very interesting. It's very nice to get that feedback. Thank you. Claudia says, how does one get management buy into agile concepts? That's a very good question. How does one get the management buy into agile concepts? It's all about value. It's money. We all know that the this upfront analysis is actually quite expensive. We all understand that we want to get things out of the door quickly. It's getting to the basic thoughts of delighting your client. You have to delight your client. And by delivering quickly, by getting client feedback, by engaging them, that's when clients start to give you client satisfaction, 100% client satisfaction. So for example, we had a situation where we would demonstrate software every 3 weeks, and we started off by just doing a webinar with screenshots, and the screenshots, yeah, that seemed to be fine. But after 3 of these webinars, the client started to say, can we actually see the software working? And we thought, yeah, okay, we can start demonstrating the software to the client with the webinar. Now, these are 14 clients from around the world dialing in and watching. And then they started to actually see the software working. They started to trust the software. They started to give feedback. And after a few of those sessions, the client started to say, hey, can we actually drive the software and try it for ourselves? And then we started to let them drive the software during the demonstration. What this resulted in was the clients actually taking the software as soon as it was ready and delivering it. So we were delivering it into production. So it means that they were actually wanting to get the software because they trusted it, they'd seen it working. Before, it was a major battle for them to actually download the software and install it into their test environment. Now they couldn't wait to get it. So we knew that we were delivering the right thing. And these sorts of stories are very interesting for management. Are there any other questions? Okay, we have a question from Erica. Thank you for your engaging presentation. There are key factors. Are there key factors that make Agile different from Scrum techniques beside British and American accents? That's a very nice accent. I like that very much. Scrum is the most popular agile technique, without a doubt. What I actually recommend is you look at the problem that your organization needs to solve and you choose whatever technique it is or pieces from different techniques and you use them for your solution. There are a lot of people out there, a lot of coaches that believe that Scrum is, you have to do 2 week time boxes and that there's no role of a project manager, etc. And these are pretty hard statements to make to large organizations. So if you're working for a pharmaceutical company or a bank, you're going to have lots of project managers that are extremely proud project managers. And to say that these roles go because you're adopting Scrum, that's a questionable approach. So um, Agile is basically the word that the umbrella expression for different techniques. Scrum is one, Kanban is another, XP is another. There is something from the UK called Dynamic System Delivery Method, or DSDM. That's better in larger organizations such as insurance, such as pharmaceutical, such as government. There is a new book or relatively new book that's just come out that's talking about agile in government projects, large government projects, and there it talks a lot about DSDM. But Scrum is very popular in Europe. Does that answer your question? Okay, so we have another question, which is where to start when wanting to go agile. Well, there are two approaches to this. One approach is you recognize that there is a need to change. Well, both approaches, you need to recognize there is a need to change. That means you're not delivering projects. That means your clients are unhappy. There is some sort of burning platform that you want to improve. People are frustrated maybe within the organization. So one approach, which is very common, is to take a particular team that's under pressure, has management exposure, get them trained up, let them run in an agile world, in an agile way. If you want to take a team that's under pressure because they need to deliver. You don't want to take a team that's not really under pressure. You need to take a team that's under pressure, see how they perform. And then if it's successful within your organization, then start rolling it out elsewhere. That's one, at a very high level, that's one approach. Another approach is to say, okay, guys, we need to really change, fundamentally change. We have too much. The story I'm talking about is another software house. They had 4 levels of hierarchy. They could not deliver anything. They went in 2008 they could deliver 4 times to the client. In 2011 they only delivered once to all their clients. That's a disaster. Only once. That's not very innovative. No innovation can take place. So what they did was they took 6 months. They took 6 months to train everybody. They said, we're changing. We're going to train you all. What they actually did is they had 3 areas of work, and they put those areas up in columns, and then in rows they had all the employees, and they gave the employees 5 weeks to decide which team they wanted to work in, or what area they wanted to work in, and what they wanted to do, and that included the management team. They expected 30% of management to leave and 20% of the team to leave, of the staff to leave. That's quite a high turnover. At the end of the day, only 5% of people left the organization. They'd reduced the organization from 4 levels of hierarchy to 2. And they switched on big ban at the beginning of this year. By June, they had already delivered 4 times to all of their clients. Now they're getting innovative. That's also a good statement to try to get management onto Agile. Being more innovative, delivering frequently to clients. Are there any other questions? Oh, there's quite a few here. Scrolling down. If you have a specific scope outcome that must be delivered, how does that affect an agile project when you have a variable scope? Okay, so this is the classic example of I must deliver this by a certain date, and I have this much time and money. So the, an approach that DSDM has is to say, well, actually, we're going to, at a high level, look at all our project and what we have to deliver and say what is must have, should have, and could have. 60% must, 20% should, 20% coulds. Now, what usually happens is actually at a high level, everything is a must. That's what really happens. And that's something I've seen. So the devil is in the details. So I'll give you an example. I must be able to search for a client. That must be in my software. Otherwise, my software is unusable. But most people, when they think about searching, they're thinking about, I want to search for a surname, a forename, an age, a town, maybe even the number of children they have. So the ability to search is a must. But the only thing that's really a must when you think of those 5 search criteria is to be able to search by the surname. That's the only thing that's a must. So the devil in breaking down that scope is in the details. And one approach is to use Moscow prioritization across the whole project and down. Okay, let's see where else are we with questions. Erica was happy with her answer, and then we have Wendy. Which large organizations have successfully implemented Agile management or Agile project management? Well, let's define first of a large organization. How about an entire investment bank in the City of London, a Japanese bank? They had a pretty savage situation. Their projects were all late. They were working on projects, or they had 2 project teams delivering the same solution, but they didn't know about it. They had a project or a system that was in place for 18 months, no users, but they were still operating it and supporting it and calling the vendor in the middle of the night. So they had a pretty savage situation. And when we look at XP, for example, XP won't solve that because that's writing software. Scrum is all around delivering software. And Agile project management, well, that's a little bit more, that's putting the disciplines of project management in place. And they decided to adopt DSDM, so this dynamic systems delivery method, for their entire organization. And they used this method for also delivering office refurbishment. So that's desks, carpets, painting the walls. They also used it for defining the strategy of their disaster recovery. No software involved, no IT involved, just the strategy. So they started off, and they engaged a team of consultants or coaches to help them through this process, and it took them about a year. They trained 300 people. But at the end of the day, what they had was a clear governance. Every project could report into or reported into the steering committee with the C-level executives. And traditionally, you'll have the project manager reporting in, and he will do something called watermelon reporting, which is everything is green until you crack it open and it's red on the inside. And we want to get away from that. So we also wanted these new agile projects to have a head, which was the sponsor, the project manager, have a visionary, a business visionary, and the technical architect. These guys got together every month, decided what the status of their project was, and it was the sponsor that reported to the committee, not the project manager. It meant that the sponsor was engaged. Does that answer your question? I hope that does, Wendy. Are there any other questions? Okay. Beate is asking, there's no more plans with Agile. I can't believe, because you need to know when the product is ready to use. Developing software, for example, you have a purpose for what the software should be. You need the function. So you need a plan, isn't it? Absolutely agree with you. Yeah, I completely agree with you, Beate. You need to have a plan. Now, when we talk about plans in an Agile world, we're not talking about a critical path or a Gantt chart. We can actually get rid of your Microsoft project license. which I'm sure many people will be very happy about, including the finance director. But what you do need is a high-level plan. Now, in Agile project management with DSDM, you set out your time boxes and you put a focus of each of those time boxes into the future. What is it you're going to build in those time boxes? So in projects, you may have several time boxes making up a release. And what will happen is you will start working immediately on the most important things first, which we've seen. You're working on those most important things first. Now you're going to learn after 2 or 3 weeks. And what will happen is something will get done, you'll discover something, and you'll think, I've got something here that I also need to do in the next time box. And what will happen is if that's of a high enough priority, something will slip out of that time box, which will slip out of the next, which will slip out of the next. And at the end, where all your low-level priority items are, something will drop out of scope. But you know that only after 3 weeks. You don't know that, so you're getting away from the problem of knowing what's dropped out of scope 2 or 3 days before you do the release. And this is about demonstrating control. You're demonstrating control, that you know what's being built and what you should be delivering at the end of the release, at the end of the project, in your product. Demonstrating control. Here, this is extremely important. This is an extremely important facet of DSDM and Dynamic System Delivery Method, DSDM, and Agile Project Management. Something that Scrum doesn't have. Does that answer your question? Okay. Beat is also mentioning here, MS Project is a tool to legitimate time in work of a project manager, but there are a lot of real work you have to do as a PM. I'm a PM and know about it. Yes, indeed. It's an example we had was, we knew at the beginning of a project that we had 4 teams. We knew what the focus of those 4 teams were. We knew what they had to deliver. We knew, or we had a really good idea about how we were going to allocate those the time boxes, which time boxes took which pieces of functionality. That was a very, very simple planning tool. There's no Microsoft project needed. Any other questions? Okay, that was Beatrice saying thank you. Any other questions? So there's no more questions coming in right now. Time is 11. We are through with the webinar. Like I said, we will send a recording, or we have a recording of this. We will save that, make that available to you. You will get a follow-up email with all of that information on it. On behalf of everybody here, we would like to say thank you very much and hope to hear from you soon. Thank you.